They say desperation smells like cheap coffee and stale rain. For 23-year-old waitress Cassidy Miller, it tasted like salt tears in a greasy spoon diner at 2 a.m. She thought she was alone when she whispered the words that would shatter her life. I need a husband by tomorrow, or I lose everything. She didn't know who was sitting in the booth directly behind her. She didn't know that the man listening wasn't a savior, but a king among wolves. And she certainly didn't know that by the time the sun came up. She'd be wearing the ring of the most dangerous man in Chicago. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a contract signed in blood. The neon sign of Jerry's all-night diner flickered with a rhythmic, dying buzz that seemed to match the pounding headache behind Cass Miller's eyes. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The rain outside was relentless, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of oil and grit. But inside, the air was stagnant, smelling of burnt bacon and floor cleaner. Cass wiped down the counter for the 10th time that hour, her movements mechanical. Her uniform, a pastel pink that had long since faded to a depressing grey, hung loosely on her frame. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, every spare dollar funneling into the legal fund that was currently sitting at a pathetic balance of $400. "Hey, Cass, you good?" Jerry, the owner, a man whose grease stains had grease stains, leaned out of the kitchen window. He was a good man, but he paid minimum wage and looked the other way when the local gangs came in to collect their protection fees. "I'm fine, Jerry. Just tired." Cass lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Last customer is in booth 4. Soon as he's gone, flip the sign." Cass glanced toward the back of the diner. Booth 4 was the one furthest from the door, shrouded in shadow because the overhead bulb had blown 3 weeks ago, and Jerry was too cheap to replace it. She could barely make out the figure sitting there. He had been there for an hour, nursing a single black coffee. He wore a heavy charcoal coat, the collar turned up, and he hadn't looked at his phone once. He was just staring, not at her, but at the rain streaking the window. She grabbed the coffee pot and walked over. "Top off, sir." The man didn't jump. He didn't even flinch. He just slid his mug slightly to the right. "Please." His voice was a low rumble, like gravel shifting under tires. As she poured, she caught a glimpse of his hand. It was large, scarred across the knuckles, and on his pinky finger sat a heavy silver ring with an insignia she couldn't make out. He looked up then. His eyes were a startling, icy blue, cutting through the dim light like lasers. He had the kind of face that belonged on a magazine cover or a wanted poster, sharp jawline, stubble that looked intentional, and a hardness that made her breath hitch. "Thanks," he said, dismissing her with a nod. Cass retreated to the counter, her heart hammering for reasons she couldn't explain. She pulled her phone out of her apron. One missed call. Mrs. Gable, Department of Child Services. Her stomach dropped through the floor. She dialed the number, retreating to the small, cramped break area behind the pie display case. She knew Mrs. Gable wouldn't answer at 2 a.m., so she hit voicemail. But then she saw the text message that had come in 5 minutes ago. Hearing moved up. 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Judge wants to see a stable home environment. If you are still single and living in that studio, Mia goes to foster care. This is final notice. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the linoleum. Cass sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Mia, her 6-year-old sister, The only good thing left in a world that had taken their parents in a car crash 6 months ago. The state argued that a 23-year-old waitress working double shifts in a studio apartment wasn't stable. They wanted a 2-parent household. They wanted income verification. They wanted a husband. A sob ripped through her throat before she could stop it. Then another. She buried her face in her apron, trying to stifle the sound. But the dam had broken. "I can't lose her," she whispered into the fabric, her voice cracking. "God, please, I need a miracle. I need a husband by tomorrow." It was a ridiculous, hysterical thing to say. A plea to a universe that had stopped listening years ago. She cried until her chest ached, the hopelessness settling over her like a heavy shroud. She wiped her eyes aggressively, sniffing, and stood up. She had to clean booth 4. She had to go home. She had to pack Mia's bags because tomorrow she was going to lose her. She walked out from behind the counter, composing her face into a mask of numbness. She grabbed the check pad and walked to booth 4. The man was still there, but he wasn't looking at the window anymore. He was looking directly at her. "Here's the check. Sir, we're closing in. Sit down." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with such calm authority that Cass found herself sliding into the booth opposite him before her brain could protest. "Excuse me," she stammered, gripping her notepad. "Sir, I can't." "You need a husband by tomorrow," he said. He didn't ask. He stated it as a fact. Cass froze. The blood drained from her face. "You were listening. You weren't exactly whispering." "Tesoro," he replied, his accent thick and unplaceable. "And the walls in this dump are paper thin." "That's none of your business," Cass snapped, standing up. "Pay your bill and leave." The man reached into his coat pocket. Cass flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, he pulled out a stack of $100 bills thick enough to choke a horse and dropped it on the table. Then, he placed a business card next to it. It was black, with nothing but a phone number embossed in gold. "Sit," he repeated, louder this time. She sat. "My name is Dominic Valenti," he said. The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone in Chicago knew the name Valenti. It was usually followed by words like racketeering, indictment, or suspected arson. The Valentis owned the construction unions, the shipping yards, and half the politicians in the city. And Dominic, he was the eldest son, the shark. "I know who you are," she whispered, terror gripping her throat. "Good, then you know I don't waste time." Dominic leaned forward, the shadows retreating from his face. "You have a problem. You need a husband to keep your sister. I have a problem. I need a wife to secure a trust fund that my grandfather locked away until my 35th birthday. Which is, coincidentally, tomorrow." Cass stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "You're joking." "Do I look like a man who tells jokes?" He didn't. He looked like a man who signed death warrants while eating breakfast. "I need a woman with no criminal record, no connections to my rivals, and enough desperation to not ask questions." Dominic continued, his eyes scanning her face, as if appraising a used car. "You check every box. You want to marry me?" Cass asked, her voice trembling. "A waitress." "I want a business arrangement," Dominic corrected. "We go to City Hall at 8 a.m. We sign the papers. You get the stable home you need for the judge. I'll buy a house in the suburbs or put it in your name. If that helps the case, I get access to my grandfather's legacy." "And then what?" Cass asked, her mind racing. "We just divorce." Dominic's expression darkened. A muscle in his jaw ticked. We stay married for 1 year. That is the stipulation of the trust. 1 year of playing house. You live your life. I live mine. But in public, you are Mrs. Valenti. You wear the ring. You smile at the galas. You don't speak to the press. And if I say no, Dominic gestured to the empty diner, then you walk out of here, go to your hearing tomorrow alone, and watch them take your sister away. It was cruel. It was manipulative. It was exactly the kind of leverage a man like Dominic Valenti used to build an empire. Cass looked at the money on the table. It was more than she made in 6 months. She looked at Dominic, this lethal, beautiful, terrifying stranger. Every instinct in her body screamed when he was dangerous. His world was made of bullets and blood. But then she thought of Mia. She thought of Mia's small hands gripping her shirt when the thunder got too loud. She thought of the promise she made to their dying mother. I will keep us together. 1 year, Cass asked, her voice barely audible. 365 days, Dominic confirmed. After that, you get $5 million and a clean divorce. You and your sister never have to work again. $5 million. It was an abstract number, like the distance to the moon. Why me? She asked. You could have any model or socialite in the city. Models talk, Dominic said, his gaze dropping to her faded name tag. Socialites have fathers who ask questions. You, Cassidy, you're invisible. And right now, invisible is exactly what I need. He slid the stack of cash toward her. This is for a dress and a lawyer to look over the prenup, though I assure you, it's ironclad. Meet me at the clerk's office on Clark Street at 7:45 a.m. Don't be late. He stood up, towering over the booth. He was massive, easily 6'3". He buttoned his coat, the interaction seemingly over for him. Wait, Cass said, standing up too. How do you know I'll show up? Dominic paused. He turned back, and for a split second, something flickered in those ice-blue eyes, something that wasn't just cold calculation. It looked almost like admiration, or maybe it was just pity. Because, he said, opening the door to the rainy night, you look like a woman who would burn the world down for the people she loves, and I'm handing you the matches. The bell above the door chimed, and he was gone. Cass stood alone in the diner, the smell of his expensive cologne lingering in the air, mixing with the scent of stale coffee. She looked down at the table. The cash was real. The card was real. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had just made a deal with the devil. The Cook County clerk's office was a drab, fluorescent-lit purgatory where romance usually went to die amidst paperwork and long lines. But when Dominic Valenti arrived, the lines miraculously disappeared. Cass stood by the metal detector at the entrance, shivering despite the wool coat she had bought at a 24-hour thrift store an hour ago. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night scrubbing her apartment, packing Mia's things, and staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was insane. She wore a simple white dress she'd found on a clearance rack. It was modest, knee-length, and the only thing that made her look remotely like a bride and not a tired waitress. A black SUV, sleek and armored like a tank, pulled up to the curb. The driver, a man with a neck thick enough to stop a shovel, got out and opened the back door. Dominic stepped out. If he looked intimidating in a diner booth, he was devastating in daylight. He wore a 3-piece black suit that fit him like a second skin, tailored to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders. He wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He walked straight to her, ignoring the stares of passers-by. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a greeting. He simply looked her up and down, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on the simple dress. "You're here," he said. "I'm here," Cass replied, clutching her purse. "Did you mean what you said about the house? The judge needs to see it's handled." Dominic cut her off. He extended his arm. "Let's go." Taking his arm felt like touching a live wire. He was solid, warm, and smelled of sandalwood and danger. As they walked into the building, 2 security guards immediately stepped aside, nodding deferentially to Dominic. "Mr. Valenti, we have the judge waiting in the private chambers." "Private chambers," Cass whispered as they were ushered past a room full of waiting couples. "I don't wait in lines." "Cassidy," Dominic murmured, guiding her through a heavy oak door. The ceremony, if you could call it that, took 5 minutes. There were no vows of love, no poetry, just a grey-haired judge who looked nervous and kept wiping sweat from his forehead. "Do you—" "Dominic Santino Valenti. Take this woman." "I do." Dominic's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "And do you, Cassidy Marie Miller?" Cass looked at Dominic. Up close, she could see a small scar above his left eyebrow. She wondered how he got it. She wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Then she thought of the foster care system. "I do," she said, her voice firm. Dominic turned to his bodyguard, who handed him a small velvet box. Dominic opened it, revealing a ring that made Cass gasp. It was a vintage diamond, easily 4 carats, set in platinum with intricate filigree. It looked like something stolen from a museum. He took her hand. His skin was rough against hers. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said quietly, only for her to hear. "Don't lose it." "I won't," she breathed. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the judge said, stamping the paperwork with a heavy thud. "You may kiss the bride." Cass froze. They hadn't discussed this. Dominic turned to her. He removed his sunglasses, revealing those piercing eyes. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Make it look real," he whispered. He placed one hand on the small of her back, pulling her flush against him, and cupped her jaw with the other. His thumb grazed her lower lip, sending a jolt of electricity straight to her toes. Then he kissed her. It wasn't a chaste peck. It was possessive, demanding. His lips were firm and hot, moving against hers with a practiced intensity that made her knees buckle. For a terrifying second, Cass forgot about the contract, the money, and the danger. She just felt him. She melted into him, her hands instinctively clutching the lapels of his suit. He pulled away slowly, his eyes dark. He stared at her for a beat longer than necessary, his breathing slightly heavier. "Good," he said, putting his sunglasses back on. "Let's go get your sister." The drive to the courthouse for the custody hearing was silent. Cass sat in the back of the SUV, the leather seat softer than her bed. Dominic was on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire Italian. She caught words like shipment and Moretti, but she didn't dare ask. When they arrived at the family court, Mrs. Gable was waiting outside the courtroom, checking her watch with a smug expression. She looked up as Cass approached, ready to deliver bad news. Her jaw dropped when she saw who was walking beside Cass. Dominic Valenti walked with the swagger of a man who owned the pavement. He had his hand on Cass's lower back, a protective, claiming gesture. "Mrs. Gable," Cass said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is my husband, Dominic." Mrs. Gable blinked rapidly. "Husband? Since when the file says you are single?" "As of this morning," Dominic interjected, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. He handed her the marriage certificate. "We've been keeping it private, but given the circumstances, we decided to make it official for Mia's sake." Mrs. Gable looked at the certificate, then at Dominic, then at the massive diamond on Cass's finger. She looked terrified. Everyone in the city knew not to cross a Valenti. "I see," Mrs. Gable stammered. "Well, Mr. Valenti, your reputation is complicated, but financial stability is a key factor. My wife and I have purchased a home in Lake Forest," Dominic said, signaling his bodyguard to hand over a folder. "Here is the deed. 5 bedrooms. Secure, near the best schools. And here is a bank statement for a trust established in Mia Miller's name this morning. $500,000 for her education." Cass whipped her head around to look at him. He hadn't mentioned a trust for Mia. Mrs. Gable opened the folder. Her eyes widened. The fight went out of her instantly. You couldn't argue with a deed to a mansion and a 6-figure trust fund. "Well," Mrs. Gable said, closing the folder, "it seems circumstances have changed dramatically. If the home visit checks out next week, I see no reason to remove the child." Cass felt tears prick her eyes. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Mrs. Gable said, eyeing Dominic nervously. "Just be careful. Ms. Miller, Mrs. Valenti." They walked out of the courthouse an hour later, full custody papers in hand. Cass felt lightheaded. "You put $500,000 in a trust for Mia?" she asked as they reached the car. Dominic lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind. "Pocket change. Besides, it sells the lie. If I'm going to play the loving stepfather, I have to pay the price of admission." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really, it can't just be for your inheritance." Dominic blew a stream of smoke into the grey sky. He looked at her, and for the first time, his face looked weary. "My family is at war. Cassidy. A war you don't want to know about. My grandfather's trust doesn't just give me money. It gives me the seat at the head of the table. It gives me the power to end the war." He opened the car door for her. "I'm using you to become the king. Don't mistake my generosity for kindness. It's strategy." Cass climbed into the car. She looked at the ring on her finger. It felt heavier now. She had secured Mia's future. But as the car pulled away, followed by 2 other black SUVs, she realized she had walked straight into a battlefield, and she was the newest pawn. The Valenti estate in Lake Forest was not a home. It was a fortress disguised as a French chateau, surrounded by 12-foot iron gates and patrolled by men who looked more like private military contractors than security guards. The mansion sat on 10 acres of manicured silence. For the first week, Cass felt like an intruder in her own life. She and Mia had been moved from their crumbling studio apartment into a suite of rooms that was larger than the entire diner where she used to work. Mia was ecstatic, running through the halls with a newfound freedom, marveling at the indoor pool and the endless supply of snacks in the industrial-sized kitchen. But for Cass, the silence was deafening. Dominic was a ghost. He left before dawn and returned long after she had gone to bed. The only proof of his existence was the fresh pot of coffee in the morning and the occasional scent of sandalwood lingering in the hallway. She saw him on the news. Though Channel 5 reported a suspicious fire at a warehouse in the shipping district, a warehouse owned by the Sabatini family, the Valenti's bitter rivals. Cass watched the footage of the flames, clutching her tea, wondering if her husband had lit the match. On the 7th day, the ghost appeared. Cass was in the kitchen, trying to convince the stern housekeeper, Mrs. Rossi, that she was capable of making her own toast, when Dominic walked in. He was in his usual armor, a dark navy suit. Tie loosened. Eyes tired. "Leave us," Dominic murmured to Mrs. Rossi. The woman vanished instantly. Cass leaned against the marble island, crossing her arms. "I was beginning to think you lived at the office." "I don't have an office. I have territories," Dominic corrected, pouring himself a glass of water. He downed it in one go. "We have an event tonight, the annual Chicagoan Philanthropy Gala. It's mandatory." "Mandatory for whom?" "For us. For Mrs. Valenti." He set the glass down with a sharp clink. The trust fund transfer was initiated, but the board of trustees is watching. They need to see the happy couple. They need to see that I am settled, domesticated, and not volatile. "Are you?" Cass asked, her voice quiet. "Volatile." Dominic looked at her. The air in the kitchen grew heavy. "I am what I need to be to keep us alive. A stylist will be here at noon. Be ready by 6. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "And Cassidy, wear the red dress they bring you. Black makes you look like a widow, and I don't plan on dying tonight." The stylist, a frantic woman named Chloe, descended upon the house with racks of clothing that cost more than Cass would earn in 10 lifetimes. But Dominic's instruction was clear. The red dress, it was a weapon made of silk, strapless, with a sweetheart neckline and a slit that ran dangerously high up her left thigh. The gown was a deep, blood-red crimson. When Cass looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. Her lips painted a matching ruby red. She looked fierce. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged to Dominic Valenti. When she descended the grand staircase at 6 o'clock, Dominic was waiting at the bottom. He was checking his watch, but he froze when he saw her. His hand dropped to his side. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, darkened. He watched her every step, his gaze tracing the line of her throat, the curve of her waist. For a moment, the air between them crackled with something that wasn't just a business arrangement. It was raw, magnetic hunger. "Well?" Cass asked, her heart hammering against her ribs as she reached the bottom step. "Is it enough to fool the board?" Dominic stepped closer, the scent of his cologne enveloping her. He reached out, his fingers grazing her bare shoulder, sending a shiver down her spine. "You look dangerous, Tesoro," he whispered, his voice rough. "If we aren't careful, you'll start a war all on your own." The gala was held at the Art Institute of Chicago. The room was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, filled with the city's elite politicians, judges, CEOs, and the unspoken underworld kings who pulled their strings. When Dominic and Cass entered, the room went silent. It was a tangible drop in volume, heads turning, whispers igniting behind champagne flutes. Dominic placed a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish. "Smile," he murmured in her ear. "They're all waiting for a crack in the facade." Cass smiled until her cheeks hurt. She shook hands with senators who looked at Dominic with fear and at her with pity. She played the part. "Yes, we're so happy. Yes." The house is lovely. No, we haven't set a honeymoon date yet. Dominic is so busy. But the tension shifted when a man approached them near the ice sculpture. He was older than Dominic, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his reptilian eyes. He was flanked by two men who were clearly armed under their jackets. "Dominic," the man said, spreading his arms. "And the new bride, I must say, you work fast. I didn't even know you were dating." Dominic's grip on Cass's waist tightened, almost to the point of pain. "Lorenzo, I didn't think you'd show your face after the unfortunate electrical fire at your warehouse this week." Lorenzo Sabatini, the rival Don. Lorenzo laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Insurance covers fires, Dominic, but it doesn't cover broken hearts." He turned his gaze to Cass, his eyes raking over her with unsettling familiarity. "You're a lovely thing, much too pretty for a butcher like a Valenti. Tell me, my dear, did he tell you about his first wife?" Cass froze. "First wife? Careful, Lorenzo," Dominic warned, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. "Oh, she doesn't know." Lorenzo feigned surprise. "She died in a car accident. Brakes failed, or were cut. Depends on who you ask. A tragic business. Dominic has a habit of losing the things he loves." Lorenzo stepped closer to Cass, invading her personal space. "If you ever get tired of living in a fortress, Mrs. Valenti, give me a call. I treat my possessions with much more care." Before Cass could react, Dominic moved. It was a blur of motion. He grabbed Lorenzo's wrist, twisting it subtly, but with enough force that Lorenzo winced. "Touch her again," Dominic whispered, loud enough for only them to hear. "And I will burn the rest of your city to the ground, with you inside it." He shoved Lorenzo back. The tension in the room spiked. Security guards started to move in. "Let's go," Dominic said, grabbing Cass's hand. He didn't wait for goodbyes. He dragged her toward the exit, his body radiating fury. "Dominic, wait!" Cass gasped as he pulled her out into the cool night air. "What did he mean? Your first wife. You never told me. Get in the car!" Dominic roared, shoving her into the waiting SUV. He climbed in after her, slamming the door. "Drive!" he barked at the driver. As the car peeled away from the curb, Cass turned to him, anger overriding her fear. "You lied to me. You said I was safe. You said this was just business. That man, he threatened me. And who was his wife? Was she murdered?" Dominic stared out the window. His jaw clenched so hard, a vein throbbed in his temple. "She wasn't murdered. Cassidy. She was collateral damage, just like you will be if you don't shut up and let me think." "I am not collateral damage," Cass yelled. "I am your wife, even if it's fake. I am the one wearing the target." "You think this is fake?" Dominic turned on her, his eyes blazing. "The paper is real. The ring is real. The target is real. Lorenzo wasn't flirting with you. Cassidy, he was marking you. He was telling me that he knows my weak point." "Me," Cass breathed. "I'm your weak point. We've known each other for a week." "It doesn't matter," Dominic said, his voice dropping, sounding suddenly exhausted. "You are a Valenti now. And in my world, that means you are hunted." Suddenly, the driver shouted, "Boss 2 bogies, coming up fast on the rear. No plates." Dominic cursed. He reached under his seat and pulled out a submachine gun. "Get down," he shouted at Cass. And then the back window shattered. The sound of gunfire inside a closed vehicle was deafening. Cass screamed, throwing herself onto the floor of the SUV as glass rained down on her red dress. The car swerved violently, tires screeching against the asphalt. Matteo evasive maneuvers get us to the safe house, Dominic yelled, leaning over the seat to return fire through the shattered rear window. The tat-tat-tat of his weapon vibrated through the floorboards against Cass's cheek. The car slammed into something another car and spun. Cass was thrown against the door panel, her head cracking against the leather. The world spun. "Hold on." Dominic's hand was on her neck, pushing her down, shielding her body with his own. A massive impact shook the SUV from the side. Metal crunched. The car tilted, threatening to roll, before slamming back down onto 4 wheels. The engine roared as Matteo floored it, breaking through the blockade. "We're clear!" Matteo shouted from the front, his voice strained. "But the radiator is busted. We won't make it to the safe house." "Go to the old packing plant in the industrial sector," Dominic ordered. "It's closer. Kill the lights." The next 10 minutes were a blur of terror. Cass lay curled in a ball, her hands over her ears, praying. She thought of Mia. Oh God. Mia. Is she safe? "Mia," Cass gasped. "Dominic, the house." "Mia. The house is a fortress. Cassidy. She is safer there than anywhere else on Earth." "We drew the fire. They wanted us," Dominic said, though his voice was tight with pain. The car skidded to a halt inside a dark, abandoned warehouse. The engine died with a sputtering cough. "Out, now!" Dominic commanded. He opened the door and pulled Cass out. Her legs were shaking so badly she couldn't stand. He scooped her up into his arms, bridal style. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No, you can't." He carried her up a rusted metal staircase to a small office overlooking the factory floor. Matteo stayed below, guarding the entrance with an assault rifle. Dominic kicked the door open and set her down on a dusty leather couch. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. "Are you hurt?" Dominic asked, his hands roaming over her arms, checking for blood. "Did any glass cut you?" "I'm fine," Cass said, her teeth chattering. I'm fine." She looked at him. In the moonlight, his face was pale, and then she saw it, the dark stain spreading across the white dress shirt under his tuxedo jacket. "Dominic," she whispered, "you're bleeding." He looked down at his side. "It's just a graze, a ricochet." "Sit down," she ordered, the panic giving way to adrenaline. She had been a waitress for 6 years. She was used to fixing things, cleaning messes. "Let me see." Dominic hesitated, then sank into the desk chair with a groan. "There's a first aid kit in the bottom drawer." Cass scrambled to get it. She knelt between his legs, her red dress pooling on the dirty floor. She unbuttoned his vest and shirt, pushing the fabric aside. It was more than a graze. A bullet had torn a jagged line across his ribs. It was bleeding sluggishly, but deep. "This needs stitches," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the alcohol wipes. "Do it." Dominic gritted out. "There's a suture kit in the box." "I'm a waitress. Dominic, not a surgeon." "You have steady hands. I saw you pouring coffee at 3 a.m. Just clean it and sew it, unless you want me to bleed out." Cass swallowed hard. She cleaned the wound, apologizing every time he hissed in pain. She threaded the needle. "Talk to me," she said, trying to distract herself as she pierced his skin. "Tell me why they hate you. Tell me why Lorenzo said you killed your wife." Dominic gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles white. He didn't answer until she was halfway done. "Her name was Eleanor," he said, his voice strained. "She was sweet, innocent, like you. I thought I could keep the business separate from the marriage. I was arrogant. Lorenzo Sabatini rigged her car. He wanted to send a message to my father. The message was, 'You are not untouchable.'" Cass tied off the last stitch and snipped the thread. She looked up at him. His face was slick with sweat. His eyes closed. "So you built the walls," she said softly. "You became the shark to make sure no one could ever hurt you again." Dominic opened his eyes. They were blue fire. "No, I became the shark so I could kill them all. Every single person who had a hand in it. Lorenzo is the last one left." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a smudge of dirt. "I didn't want this, Cassidy. I didn't want another wife. I didn't want to drag another innocent woman into this hell. But my grandfather's trust, it controls the commission. If I don't get that seat, Lorenzo takes over the city. And if Lorenzo takes over, the streets run red with blood. I married you to save Chicago." "You married me to save yourself," Cass whispered. "Maybe," he admitted. His gaze dropped to her lips. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something heavier, hotter. They were alone in the dark, the smell of gunpowder and blood in the air. He was shirtless, wounded, dangerous. She was in a ruined ball gown. "You should be afraid of me," Dominic murmured, leaning closer. "I am," Cass said. But she didn't pull away. He kissed her. This time, there was no audience. There were no cameras. It was desperate and raw, tasting of copper and fear. Cass's hands found their way into his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, she forgot the contract. She forgot that he was a criminal kingpin. She just wanted to feel alive, and he was the most alive thing she had ever touched. Dominic groaned low in his throat, pulling her onto his lap, mindful of his wound. His hand slid up her thigh, gripping the silk of her dress. Suddenly, he stopped. He pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "No," he rasped. "No, I can't." "Dominic, I promised you," he said, his voice jagged. "A business arrangement. If we do this, if we cross this line, I won't be able to let you go in a year. And you need to go. You need to be free of me." He gently lifted her off his lap and buttoned his ruined shirt. "Get some sleep. Cassidy." "We move at dawn." Cass curled up on the couch, watching him keep watch by the window. She realized then that the danger wasn't just the bullets. The danger was that she was falling in love with a man who was convinced he was too broken to be loved. The weeks following the gala were a blur of tension. Dominic moved Cass and Mia to an even more secure location, a penthouse in the city with bulletproof glass and private elevators. He doubled the security detail. Life returned to a strange, strained routine. Dominic was working 18-hour days, dismantling Lorenzo's operation piece by piece. He was ruthless, efficient, and distant. He avoided being alone with Cass, clearly terrified of what had almost happened in the warehouse. But the threat was closer than they thought. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Cass was helping Mia with a drawing at the kitchen table. Mia was drawing their castle. "Why did you draw the angry man?" Mia, Cass asked, pointing to a figure in the corner of the paper, drawn in black crayon. "That's the man who watches us," Mia said. Not looking up, Cass froze. "The security guard's Matteo?" "No." Mia shook her head. "The man who talks on the phone in the garage. He says bad words. He says Dominic is going to fall." Cass's blood ran cold. "Mia, who? Which man?" Mia pointed to the kitchen door. Just then, a man walked in. It was Uncle Sal. Salvatore Valenti, Dominic's uncle, was the family consigliere. He was a jovial, rotund man who always brought Mia candy. He was Dominic's most trusted advisor. "Hey, Princess," Sal beamed. "Walking in. Cassidy, darling, just stopped by to drop off some files for Dom." Cass stared at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. "He says Dominic is going to fall." "Sal," Cass said, forcing a smile. "Coffee." "Love some." As Sal turned to the coffee machine, Cass saw his phone buzz on the counter. A text message popped up on the lock screen. "Package ready. Tonight. The docks. L.S. L.S. Lorenzo Sabatini." The room spun. Uncle Sal was the leak. He was the one feeding information to Lorenzo. He was the reason they were ambushed at the gala. Cass knew she had to act, but she couldn't let Sal know she knew. She poured the coffee with shaking hands. "Actually, Sal," she said, checking her watch, "I have to run. I promised to take Mia to the dentist." "Oh, I didn't see it on the schedule," Sal said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Matteo is downstairs. He'll drive you." "No," she said too quickly. Then she softened her tone. "I mean, we're just taking a cab. It's close. I want to feel normal for a bit." Sal studied her. For a second, the jovial uncle mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation of a mobster. Then he smiled. "Of course. Be safe." Cass grabbed Mia and ran. Once they were in the elevator, she called Dominic, straight to voicemail. She called Matteo, voicemail. She hailed a cab. "Where to, lady?" Cass's mind raced. She couldn't go to Dominic's office. Sal might have men there. She couldn't go back to the diner. She had to get Mia safe, then warn Dominic. The police station? No, the Valentis owned the police. The airport? Too obvious. "Drive," she told the cabbie. "Just drive north." She texted, "Dominic, Sal is the traitor. He's working with Lorenzo. Do not go to the docks." She hit send. 10 seconds later, her phone rang. It wasn't Dominic. It was an unknown number. She answered, her hand trembling. "Hello. Mrs. Valenti." A smooth, reptilian voice purred. It was Lorenzo. "I see you've figured out our little puzzle. Clever girl." "Leave us alone," Cass hissed. "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, your husband is currently walking into a trap at the shipyard, a trap set by his beloved Uncle Sal. He's going to die tonight. Cassidy, unless what? Unless you come to me. Trade yourself for him. The shark for the wife. A romantic gesture. Don't you think?" Cass looked at Mia, who was playing with her doll in the back seat, oblivious to the fact that her sister was negotiating their lives. "If I come," Cass said, tears streaming down her face, "you let Dominic go and you leave Mia out of this. You have my word, and as a businessman, my word is bond." Cass knew he was lying, but she also knew Dominic would walk into an ambush and die if she didn't intervene. She had to buy time. "Where?" she asked. "Warehouse 4. The same one you escaped from. Fitting, isn't it?" Cass hung up. She looked at the cab driver. "Stop here." They were in front of a public library. She turned to Mia. "Mia, listen to me. You are going to go into this library. You are going to find the librarian. Mrs. Higgins, she's nice. Remember we met her. You tell her your name, and you tell her to call Mrs. Gable from Social Services. You stay with her. Do not leave with anyone but me or Dominic. Do you understand? Cass, you're scaring me." Mia whimpered. "I know, baby. I know. But I need you to be brave, like a princess in a tower. Can you do that?" Mia nodded, tears in her eyes. Cass watched Mia run into the library. She waited until she saw the security guard inside approach her. Mia was safe. Cass took a deep breath. She looked at her wedding ring. The heavy diamond glinted in the afternoon sun. "Okay," she whispered to the empty cab. "Let's go to the warehouse." She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was Mrs. Valenti, and she was going to burn the world down to save her husband. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industry, smelling of wet concrete and rust. Cass paid the cab driver with the last of the cash Dominic had given her a lifetime ago, it seemed. She pushed open the corrugated metal door of Warehouse 4, a sliver of yellow light spilling onto the rain-slicked pavement. The interior was vast. In the center, illuminated by harsh industrial lights, sat Lorenzo Sabatini. To his right stood Uncle Sal, sweating profusely. Flanking them were 4 armed guards. "Mrs. Valenti," Lorenzo purred, his voice echoing. "Punctual. Coming here without your husband's dog's bold, or stupid." Cass walked forward, hands visible. "Where is he? You said you'd let him go if I came." Lorenzo laughed. "Dominic isn't here yet, but he's on his way. He's tracking your phone, isn't he? You led him right to the slaughter." Cass's blood ran cold. She hadn't saved him. She had baited the hook. She looked at Sal, betrayal stinging her eyes. "Sal, how could you? He's your blood." "Trust doesn't pay the debts, Cassidy," Sal mumbled, refusing to meet her gaze. "Dominic, he's out of control. Lorenzo offered a way out." "You sold your nephew for poker chips," she spat. Lorenzo stood up, pulling a silver pistol from his jacket. "Enough family drama. When Dominic walks through that door, my men will end this." He stepped toward Cass, reaching out to touch her hair. "A shame to waste you. Maybe I'll keep you as a souvenir." "Don't touch her." The voice was low, lethal, and vibrated through the floorboards. The main bay door at the far end of the warehouse began to rise. Rain lashed against the concrete floor as the gap widened. Silhouetted against the stormy Chicago skyline stood Dominic Valenti. He was alone. No backup, just a man in a black trench coat. "Shoot him!" Sal screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill him now!" The 4 guards raised their rifles. Click. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the silence. The guards pulled their triggers, but nothing happened. No gunfire, just the hollow click of empty chambers. Dominic walked forward. "You should check your payroll, Lorenzo. My men pay your guards double what you do, and they pay them to forget to load their weapons." Lorenzo's eyes widened in horror. His guards dropped their useless rifles and backed into the shadows. Bought and paid for. "Traitors!" Lorenzo screamed. He raised his silver pistol, the only loaded weapon left, and aimed it at Dominic. "No!" Cass screamed. She lunged at Lorenzo, grabbing his arm. Bang! The gun went off, the sound deafening. Cass felt a searing heat graze her arm, but she dug her nails into Lorenzo's wrist. He backhanded her, a brutal strike that sent her sprawling to the concrete. "Cassidy," Dominic roared, the sound tearing from his throat. Lorenzo leveled the gun at Cass. "Stay back, Dominic, or she dies." Dominic froze 20 feet away. He slowly lowered his own gun to the floor. "Let her go. Take me. I'll take both." Lorenzo sneered. Cass looked at Dominic. He was ready to die for her. She saw a rusted pipe on the floor near her hand. She grabbed it and swung with all her might, smashing it into Lorenzo's shin. Bone crunched. Lorenzo howled, his aim faltering. That split second was all Dominic needed. He charged, tackling Lorenzo with the force of a freight train. They crashed into the table, the gun skittering away. Dominic pinned Lorenzo to the ground and rained down punches, brutal, efficient blows fueled by years of rage. This is for Eleanor, thud. This is for my father, thud. And this is for my wife. He landed a final blow that left Lorenzo unconscious. Dominic stood up, chest heaving, knuckles bloody. He turned to Sal. Uncle Sal had scrambled to pick up the silver pistol. He pointed it at Dominic with shaking hands. "Stay back. Dom, I had to do it." Dominic looked at his uncle with profound sadness. "You want respect? Sal, take it. Shoot me. Become the Don. But know this the moment you pull that trigger. You lose the only family you have left." Sal's hand shook violently. He looked at Dominic, then at the unconscious Lorenzo. With a sob, he dropped the gun and fell to his knees. "I'm sorry." "Dom?" Dominic walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Matteo is outside. He will take you to the airport. You have a one-way ticket to Sicily. If you ever set foot in Chicago again, I will kill you myself." Sal nodded frantically and ran into the rain. Dominic rushed to Cass, falling to his knees to inspect her bleeding arm. "He shot you. God, Cassidy, I'm so sorry." "It's just a scratch." She winced. "Dominic, you came." "Sure. I would have burned the city down to find you," he choked out, pulling her into his arms. "Why did you risk it?" "Because," Cass whispered, looking into his eyes. "I need a husband by tomorrow, remember." Dominic let out a broken laugh, resting his forehead against hers. "You're crazy. I learned from the best." He kissed her, then a promise sealed not in ink, but in blood and survival. "Let's go home," Dominic whispered. "Let's go get Mia." The recovery took time. Not just the physical wounds. Cass's arm healed in a few weeks, leaving a thin white scar that she secretly liked because it proved she was a survivor. But the emotional ones, the power vacuum left by Lorenzo's disappearance. He was currently serving life in a maximum security prison after an anonymous tip about his operations led the FBI to his doorstep, meant Dominic was busy. But he was different now. The darkness that had clung to him like a second skin had lifted. He delegated more. He came home for dinner, 3 months after the warehouse incident. Cass sat in the garden of the Lake Forest estate. It was spring now. The flowers were blooming, and Mia was playing on the new swing set Dominic had built with his own hands, albeit while swearing in Italian the entire time. Cass watched her sister laugh, a sound that healed the cracks in her own heart. "Penny for your thoughts." Dominic walked onto the patio. He was holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt. He looked younger, lighter. He handed her a glass and sat down next to her on the bench. "I was just thinking," Cass said, taking a sip, "about dates. Dates. Specifically, tomorrow's date." Dominic froze. He set his glass down. "Ah, right, tomorrow." Tomorrow marked exactly 365 days since they had met in the diner, since the contract was signed. "According to the prenuptial agreement," Dominic said, his voice turning formal, stiff. "Tomorrow is the dissolution date. The trust fund is fully vested in my name. The conditions have been met. You are free to go." Cass looked at him. He was staring at the grass, refusing to meet her eyes. His jaw was clenched. "And the money will?" she asked. "The 5 million. It's already in your account," he said. "Transferred this morning, plus the deed to this house. It's yours. I'll move back to the city penthouse. You and Mia should stay here. It's better for her school." He stood up abruptly. "I should go. I have a meeting with the union reps." He turned to walk away. He was letting her go. He was honoring the deal, even though it was breaking him. She could see it in the slope of his shoulders. "Dominic Valenti," Cass shouted. He stopped, but didn't turn around. Cass stood up and walked over to him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The original contract, the one she had signed with trembling hands in his lawyer's office a year ago. She walked around to face him. He looked miserable. "You're firing me?" she asked. "I'm fulfilling the agreement," he rasped. "You wanted safety. You wanted money. You have it. You don't need a dangerous man in your life anymore. Cassidy, you deserve sunlight. Not shadows?" "You idiot," she said affectionately. She held up the contract, and then, with a sharp rip, she tore it in half, then in quarters. She let the pieces flutter to the grass like confetti. Dominic stared at the paper, then at her, his eyes widening. "What are you doing?" "I'm voiding the contract," she said. "I don't want the $5 million, and I don't want a divorce." "Cassidy, be reasonable. I am." "You are the man who put a trust fund in my sister's name before you even knew me," she interrupted. "You are the man who took a bullet for me. You are the man who builds swing sets and hates every minute of it, but does it anyway because Mia asked." She stepped closer, grabbing the lapels of his t-shirt. "I don't need a husband by tomorrow. Dominic, I already have one, and I intend to keep him, unless you don't want me." Dominic let out a groan and pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. "Want you, Dio? Cassidy, I haven't been able to breathe without you for 6 months. I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," she whispered against his chest. "Then show me." He lifted her face and kissed her. It was a kiss of relief, of joy, of a future that wasn't written in blood or contracts, but in choice. "Ew, are you guys kissing again?" Mia's voice rang out from the swing set. Dominic broke the kiss, laughing, a genuine, deep laugh that rumbled in his chest. He kept his arm around Cass's waist and turned to look at the little girl who had started it all. "Yes. Piccola, we are," Dominic called back. "Get used to it." He looked down at Cass, his eyes shining. "So, Mrs. Valenti, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives?" Cass smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I don't know, but I think we should start by replacing those drapes in the living room. They're hideous." Dominic groaned. "I picked those out." "Exactly." The sun set over the estate, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The fortress had become a home. The waitress had become a queen, and the shark. He had finally found the one thing worth fighting for that didn't require a gun. He had found peace. And that is the story of Cassidy and Dominic, from a desperate plea in a diner to a love that survived bullets and betrayal. They proved that sometimes the most dangerous risks are the ones we take with our hearts. It turns out, Cassidy didn't just save her sister that night. She saved the soul of a man who thought he was beyond redemption. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes romance and twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, would you have signed that contract for $5 million? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.